Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another session from the Old Wise Asylum on this autumn equinox. Important day indeed. Ooh, summer's over and into the autumn we go. The harvest season. One of these dodgy buggers harvesting, I wonder. Well, somebody just sent me a video, but a woman talking about the UN deciding they're going for it. Whoever just carried on watching it, looked like a woman terrified to me, so I took it off the old Facebook. We don't need to be terrifying folk, do we, on the autumn equinox, but I get a point. Decisions made on April the 18th appear now to have been satisfied again, so expect the unexpected, I would suggest, in this next phase of the old New World Order. Right, so really not put much together tonight, in that I've been rather busy all week, but just to continue the fact that it's pretty clear now that what we've got across everywhere is Bolshevism, which is two forms. It's subversion and the Marxist overt moving of it, of whatever it is that they're intending to do. And we can clearly see that overt Bolshevism coming through this current Labour government down there at Chalker, Westminster. I mean, this guy's a complete maniac, and so are all these little flea bags. Have you seen them? They don't even look like they're qualified to be primary school teachers, let alone sat in a parliament. So it's not good. You've got more garbage going on over there in the US, just anything and everything to ensure King Noahide gets in, and well, who knows what's going to happen there when he gets in, but if he doesn't, it's just going to be more of the same. Sometimes it's better to have a change. You have a better chance of doing things differently than this drolling on communist bullshit that's just forcing itself down everybody's necks. It's not good, is it? It's not good at all, and I think we can all feel it and sense it. And yeah, it's just not good, is it? And of course, their arm at the moment that they're playing out and activating would be another cult of deception. That would be Islam. They're getting very excited, and now I've noted that in some parts of this country they are calling prayer. Now, you know, anything that says I'm a religion of peace and sticks that down your neck certainly isn't. And I think it's about time everybody started to recognise that you've been scuppered in the same way as the cult of Israel has blagged everybody for 70 years that it's something it isn't, and now, you know, for the last, 100 and so days we've been able to see quite clearly that actually it's nothing of the sort. In fact, if anything, it's an expression of what we saw going on in 1917 in Russia, what we saw going on in China under Mao, what we saw going on in Cambodia, what we saw going on across Africa through the 70s, and what we saw in the Second World War. It's just fascist Bolshevism combined, and it's all about murder. And they're raising up one of their biggest arms at the moment, and unfortunately, having read the book, I've known for a long time that it's not what it appears to be, and that those that say different are either lying, they haven't read the book, or they're just copying and believe it in themselves. But of course, that's not how this game works, is it? So there's a lot going on. You've got Israel have put a hell of a bomb going on in Lebanon, whether it's a tactical nuke or a bunker buster. Not sure. It does look like a bit of a nuke kind of thing that's hit off there. You've got more of an incursion into Russia now. Interested and watched a bit of a speech by Putin this week where he's trying to speak directly to the Western masses. And I mean, what he said was quite good. However, when you understand how Bolshevism works, he's failed on all counts to include the fact that the entire elites running him are the same elites running America, UK, Europe, and rest of the world. Arabs, Iran, Afghanistan, everywhere. It's the same freaks running it all. And they've all made a new deal in Kazakhstan, where all the religions have combined together to pull in this new world order, or at least the high priests of these so-called religions have made that agreement. So that's going on. It's not good. But this shower of shit we've got in now it's outrageous, to be honest, that they're actually shoving it so fast. But I can understand why they're shoving it so fast. They've a lot to get in between now and November, when America elects a new president. So I've just put some bits together tonight, really, and after I've sorted that out, we can certainly have a chat. We can have some Q&A if you want. Talk about something other than La La Land, if you wish. But there's a lot going on, let's say, and I still believe, looking at the war strategy as it is, that Russia is just basically, it's the diversion in order that they can keep all our militaries under the yoke of NATO and out of our nations, so that once the civil unrest begins, you're not going to get any of your own troops in any of your nations because NATO's got them yoked. And this is when you're going to start to see that the UN has been implementing these troops in the main tied to Kazakhstan, tied to Turkey. And you can see here on Blighty how they're putting these dumbasses in police uniforms, they're putting them in security, and they're really not up to the scratch at all. And what's really embarrassing is that behind these people are so-called English white people laughing, joking, encouraging it. I mean, what the fuck has happened to you? Did you not have any input from your grandparents as to what it is they had to deal with and face when it was their time? Are you just so inept? Are you just so full of yourselves? What has happened to these people that stand behind these subcultures rising up in security in all its forms? You see, the thing is, we're still at the point now where we're like, with us males, we're not going to be able to just sit back here. And if you do, it's just going to be another Bolshevik revolution exactly in the same way as they did in Russia. Exactly in the same way they did in China. Exactly in the same way they did in Cambodia and across Africa. It's they've got all the boys, they're all been through drugs, they're one way or another, they're dead, they're in prison, or they're cancered up, they're inept, they're no good, they're useless. What you've got left now is the boys that thought they were someone. And obviously, as we can see today and from 2020, they're not anything apart from muppets and puppets and retarded expressions of what race we used to be. It's best I can explain it, really. So nothing good at all anywhere going on that I can see. So this is what they're going to try and harvest in this next session, this next quarter, which is 3 months up to the winter solstice. So, who's joined us tonight? So, AMG Maniac says, evening all, and RJ, good evening to you. Benefactor says, welcome to the Sunday Live gig. As always, a big thank you to all our followers, and a special shout out to Sean for sharing your wisdom. Don't forget to hit the like button, of course. Benefactor says, hi, Brabus. Jane says, hello, evening everyone. Hi, Maniac. Hello to you, Jane. Mark says, evening all. Evening, Mark. PY Music says, good evening all. Good evening to you, Paul. AMG Mania, I wonder what delights Sean has in store for us this evening. Well, unfortunately, I've not really been able to put anything of major. But although what I have put together is pretty interesting anyway in and of itself. But of course, we spoke about it a lot anyway. But it's a bit more compact tonight, just to get you into your minds what it is you've got in with this Labour government. Not that they're any different than the Tories, of course, or the Liberals. But, you know, these bastards, they don't piss about. They're all... If you were saying, where have they got the uber satanic puppets, you would say they're all in Labour. They've always been so. You know, Corbyn, everybody, oh, he's lovely. The guy, as all he's ever done is called down the United Nations over and above England, Scotland, Wales and Ireland, Northern Ireland. That's all he's ever done. And people still swoon at his feet because they don't see that. Now, I don't understand why you don't see that, you know. Interestingly, I watched the other day, you know, the Prince Andrew thing. And it was by accident, but it came on, and I watched it. And I just thought, it's so protracted, so manipulated. They want you to see it in a certain way, when in fact, this is not how this game works. It doesn't work in that sense at all. But if we were to take the narrative of this, I think it was a 3-part show, probably on Netflix or something like that. So if we were to go with the narrative as they were projecting it, and that, oh, poor Andrew, he did do it, but obviously he had to pretend he didn't. He kept showing his daughters, which of course it would, and they would have been suffering through it as well, I would have supposed, if they were normal people. But throughout the whole narrative, the one thing that's missing from it all, and this is how it works for these people, that let's just say, for the sake of it, that he innocently did it, let's just say. I mean, at the end of the day, from my perspective, she was 17 years old. She was paid $5,000 each session. That's a prostitute in my eyes, and certainly not a victim. Okay? Not a victim at all. You know, she'd been with Epstein for quite a while, so I'm not accepting that if it is as it is, she was paid $15,000 to have a wicked way with lad, procured by Epstein. So that in and of itself, if that's what he did, it's actually, there's nothing to it here in England, because 16 is the age of consent. It only had a bit of an excitement going on in the US, because of course 17 is below the age of consent in the US. But here in Blighty, it didn't really have any, there was nothing to it apart from Randy Andy. He'd always been named Randy Andy anyway. And most guys his age, if you got the chance, jump on that anyway. So, you know, it's just a bit ridiculous that people were so vehement to attack him, realising that we're actually demolishing their own system. Now, but what really didn't play and project at all in this game was the fact that we all know what Epstein was. Epstein was there to blackmail. All right, so let's just say Randy Andy were thick, didn't realise what was going on, even though we know we did. That nobody at any point took on board the fact that Epstein's job was to secure blackmail against high-powered people so that he could play it out as and when. And of course, the fact that she came out at this time as well tells me that she's still a part of that network. She played a part then, and she played a part again, and then got quite a big payout by all accounts. But what I was trying to say is that it seems to be missing from the whole narrative of that show, that the fact is Epstein was there to blackmail people. All the elites, entertainers. You've got Diddy now again. See, these are all diversions, by the way, that are going on right now to divert you off what's actually going on. You know, you've got your football fanatics, they're still at it. You've had your Olympics. You've got these wars. You've got all these diversions. You've got Oasis, another diversion. You know, if anybody thinks that these guys were rebels, you know, you really haven't been following them in any way, shape or form. I mean, Noel's up his own ass because he thinks his best thing since just sliced bread and John Lennon. Liam is thick as pig shit. Now, you know, when this book script kicked off, Liam were one of the first to accept and have this idea that if you were coming to my gig, you'd to be juiced. And people either didn't see that or have forgotten about it. And he was one of the first to jump all over it, while pretending to be this anti-establishment rebel. You know, these people are nothing like what you think. They're all controlled. That's the way the entertainment works. You've got all this Diddy stuff going on now. Doing the same as Epstein to all these artists. But then, of course, everybody's all the victims. Well, are you a victim? You go to these parties, he makes it pretty clear what the crack is. Bend over, he wants to bum you stupid. And then you can be famous. Well, obviously they all said yeah, otherwise they wouldn't be famous. Yeah, it's the guys that didn't say yeah, that are the ones that have the sort of the authority to stand up and say, look, this is what's going on and it's garbage. But the rest of them that claim to be, oh, no. You took it on quite happily because it gave you the fame and the fortune that you've had. And that's pretty much it. So I don't really have much sympathy. I don't see them as victims so much, if you know what I'm saying. But again, it's just a diversion. All diversions, because it keeps people that are fixed to these particular entertainment paradigms content, happy, they're learning something, they're involved, they're engrossed in it. You know what I'm saying? You've the revamp of the Essex Boys saga. Okay, fair dues, there's a lot of stuff that should have been dealt with before. Why is it being dealt with now? Again, people that are still into that mindset, it's keeping you entertained, it's keeping you sort of off the game that's actually going on all around you. And like I said, you know, NATO. Russia has grabbed NATO into action. All our militaries are off their yoke to NATO. None of them are in your nations. None of them are going to be there or available if civil unrest kicks off. It's going to be foreign troops. It's going to be UN troops. People are missing this. They're missing this. You've got Israel now kicking off left, right and centre that it's been doing, what, for over 100 days? Slaughtering. Just slaughtering. And getting away with it. Why? Because it runs the fucking world. The cult behind Israel runs the world. Who are these people that run Israel in the government? They're all Russians. They're all Russian Bolsheviks. And none of them claim even to be Jews. They're that open about it nowadays. You know, these are Khazars. They're nothing to do with the biblical tradition at all. And it's just quite ridiculous. And Putin, this speech he gave this week, good speech, but like I said, same people are running him that are running everybody else. They just want you to think you've got friends, you've got... And now he's saying you can come over here. Oh, and apparently some jocks have rushed off over there. Well, fine if that's what you want to do, but you really think you're running into a safe haven, you know? It's like, yeah, it's just not the game. It's not what people think it is. Bolshevism's an expert first in dismantling a nation, encouraging all the brains and the wealth to leave the targeted nation. And once that happens, everybody's left to their own devices. These Bolsheviks getting put in positions of power, and they're a lot smarter than the majority of people that are left. And that's been going on for a long, long time. Especially since, you could say, 1945, when Attlee launched this huge social system, even though we had a deficit of ridiculous amounts. How they managed to fund this, well, we know how they managed to fund it. They've been floating our birth certificates on the stock market since 1933. That's how they funded the social system that was launched by Clement Attlee in 1945. Bolshevism, socialism. And it did its job quite well because it brought up an entire generation, the baby boomers, to mollycoddle them. They were babied, you know. They didn't have to leave their mummy's lap. Everything was given to them on a plate, and they just wanted to retire the minute they'd worked longer than 10 years. They sold the country out, sold the nation out because they were so selfish, so aggrandizing. That's all they thought about. They didn't even give a shit about their offspring. And that was my generation, Generation X. And you can see how it's played out. Well, that is Bolshevism. This is how it works. It's called Marxism as an active principle of the Communist Manifesto, whereas the subversive side, that is what we'd class as communism. That's the, pretending malarkey. And we've got two cults that are doing that and have done it quite well, and that would be the cult that runs Israel and the cult we call Islam, neither of which are in anything like what they pretend to be. But in the main, as I've explained before, most people that claim to be Muslims haven't got a clue what it is themselves. They only know what they were taught in the mosque as a kid, because their mum and dad threw them in the mosque to be beaten to death by these imams. So it's ignorance is the game. Ignorance is what's running everything today, and ignorance is what's giving these creatures all the power that they require. Ignorance, laziness, apathy, and everybody looking for convenience. I believe there's been a rise in use of cash over the last year, 7%, which is quite a big one. But of course, if you dip your toe into some of this financial stuff that they're talking about up there and out there, it's looking rather strange. Again, BlackRock seem to be selling their own shares. So what's going on there? BRICS have all decided they're moving along. They're actually on it. They're moving with the BRICS system now. And that means, of course, they intend to hit the dollar. Which, of course, the entire West is under and on. You've got this facial recognition being thrust in everywhere across the country. Again, they're forcing that. It's quite ridiculous, really, that they're actually forcing it. Yet, if you walk around and you cover your face onto you, but if you have a burqa on or a veil, there's no problem. See, the state is massaging these people to now express their own real heart, who they really are, instead of this pretending and hiding. And because, of course, they want war on our soil, which it's coming anyway, whether you like it or not. Sitting there watching telly and playing with yourself isn't going to stop it. It's coming, it's here, it's on. Now they're activating it, and people need to get a grip of that. My worry is, of course, that it's the security side of things that's the problem. You're not going to be calling in your own military because they're yoked to NATO. They're putting in all these subculture dumbasses into security and now giving them police uniforms, while you've got white guys at the back of them encouraging them. I mean, what kind of people are you? Have you ever sat down and actually analysed what kind of a creature you actually are? What are you? We used to call you collaborators when we'd looked into what happened in Germany and all these other nations. Yeah, it's not good, because if you think you're going to be securing this at the end of it, you want. You're actually ensuring your own demise. So yeah, that's my biggest worry, is the fact that our militaries are yoked to NATO. And I said last week, watch and keep your eyes on Israel. They're promoting Russia as the only script on the TV, but actually, where it's really happening is Israel. They're attacking Lebanon now. You know, you've got Iran round the corner. Because, of course, in Lebanon, they're attacking Hezbollah, and Hezbollah, they say, are tied to Iran. Well, of course, we know Hamas and Hezbollah were all trained by the Mossad. The ruling elite in Iran are actually a part of the cult. That's proven. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's a conspiracy fact. It's a conspiracy fact. There's no lies or bullshit in that. It's been well written about. Many books have been written about the fact that Iran has been controlled by the same cult and bloodlines that are controlling the Holy See and controlling the Kickstarter called Israel. And of course, you've got some of these small lads now celebrating that they've almost re-achieved the homeland of Khazaria, or aka the Ukraine. Again, they're you know, it's getting so blasé now. They're so confident that the Western male is just so inadequate in intellect, in courage, that, and more importantly, that they've co-opted so many of the dumb, useless Western males and females into this system through Freemasonry, through Jesuitism, Knights of Columbus, all these orders, that they're very, very confident now that they've achieved the main aim, which is there are no warriors left, just angry people that would go out on the street, shout, throw stones and spit and swear. Police. and think that that's going to solve. But then, of course, they've got the superhero for that, Tommy Robinson. So you can see it's all garbage. You've got the dream team running around, keeping you all fixed on the same garbage that you already know. And every now and again, they'll give you a little tidbit of something new, as something new plays out in La La Land. And most people think, oh, well, they must be good because look, they're onto that. Well, they're not, are they? They're not onto anything that's important. They're all speaking within the paradigm of Russia's the enemy, China's the enemy, everybody's an enemy, instead of realising that actually every nation has an enemy. And that enemy has took over all its positions of power, be that in the public or in the secret, the hidden realm, the secret societies and such. Corporatism, they control so much now of commerce that they have enough in order to drag us around by our necks, hoodwinked as we are, and basically do what they will. And that's in all nations, it's everywhere. And it's really not good. But this game, I mean, you look around now, there's so few native people in commerce now. You look around the shops. So I went to Bury the other week, last week, and it's just, there's none of us in commerce anymore. We've sort of like, it's like the baby boomer, we want to retire, go to Spain twice a year, do fuck all. We'll sell it to anybody that wants to give us the fucking money. Because they didn't have any concept of future. Because, of course, they're only seeing it, well, we're dying a bit. We won't be here, so it doesn't matter. You know, it's just so ridiculous when you can analyse exactly what's happened. And these people, they won't accept it. You won't acknowledge it. You can talk to them until you're blue in the face. But if you're not talking about holiday, they're not interested. You know what I'm saying? And they still hold a big chunk of the wealth. And that's going to get stolen because they're so stupid. You know, most of them have got all the wealth in bonds. Well, the bonds are going to be one of the first things that collapse when we get this expected crash that everybody keeps harping on about. But so if you thought you had an inheritance coming off your baby boomer parents, think again, because guaranteed all the shit's in bonds, and that's going to collapse right around your arsehole when this crash comes out. So yeah, it's not good. Where are we? Slipknot says, alright, Sean, Jackie and everyone. Alright, Slipknot. Cause 73, wave your hand and the looks like a clown. Fat Henry UK, evening to you, Fat Henry. I refuse to accept summer is over. I'm enjoying being an elderly beach bum in Devon. Well, it's not over yet, is it? We've had a decent week this week anyway. We're bloody roasting. Tuesday, Wednesday, but one thing, if you noted, there weren't a single chemtrail in the sky. So when they stop blocking the sun, that's what it's like. We forgot. Because in the main, most of the time, they're always blocking the sun. Charlie says hi. Hello, Charlie. Good evening to you. Paul says, good evening, Sean and fellow inmates. Evening, Paul. Upward Dog. Good evening, Sean and all. Good evening to you, Upward Dog. Kieran says, how are you, Sean? Lurker. Where is the Lurker? Anyway, we haven't seen you for a while. Kerry says, thanks, love from Ireland. Love back to Ireland, Kerry, and good evening to you. David says, evening, Sean, and good people of the chat. Good evening to you, David. Recycling Gestapo. Yes, Sean, the Wise Asylum rocks. Well, that's good. Because we're just going to do some music tonight because I've put it all together in images. In truth, because it works, doesn't it? Because as I said, I've not really got much together this week, unfortunately. Usually I can race it in on a Saturday and a Sunday, but it's just not worked out. Yeah, where are we? Ched's one. Good evening, Ched's. The Mystery School have designated Russia Slavery for the next epoch, American epoch after that. It's already sorted. Recycling says Sean is like an intellectual thug version of Fred Dibner. They used to call me Fred Dibner when I worked out south. Thanks for all you do, Sean. Much appreciated. The truth is hard to digest, but It's why we are here. Well, good for you, recycling Gestapo. That's quite true. Jedzwan, Astana, Satan, Kazakhstan. Precisely, Kazakhstan is exactly where they're going to shift it all to. So when it kicks off, our pilots need to go and blow the living shit out of it. Don't we? You know, it's like, now you're going to have to start thinking for yourselves, you're in the military. You're not going to do what they want you to do, are you? You've got all the weaponry. Do what needs to be done. Look for HQs. Blow the shit out of the HQs. Look for the palaces. Blow the shit out of the palaces. Not run-at-mill peasants and their huts, you know. Because that's what they want you to knock out, isn't it? Huts and peasants. Well, they're really harmless. Who knows how it's going to go. But Liam says, hello Liam. AMG Maniac, Jane and myself regularly swap chemtrail photos. Well, if you didn't notice, because I was working outside Tuesday and Wednesday, not a single trail in sight. And then they started again on Thursday. And so it slowly started to change back to what we recognise as normal weather these days. And, I mean, you know, if you're already aware of them, it doesn't really matter much. But there's a lot of people who still refuse to accept that there actually is such a thing as a chemtrail. And I just said, well, look in the sky. That's all you need to do. Have a look. But still, people don't want to pick it up and take it on. And I don't know why, to be honest. It's clearly there's a difference to weather. I think what they're actually doing with looking at the sun is lowering the temperature so that when they do want it to scare the living daylights out of the youngsters, they can stop trailing and go, look how bloody hot it is. That, oh my God, it's not normal. It's not normal, look. When that is normal, and it's the other side of it that's not normal. So I think that's the game they play. You know, if we keep it low for a few months and then let it go and go, shit, it's too hot, and all kids shit themselves and think they're all going to die. Because schools taught them that the parents, and wreck the planet and wreck the future. That's Greta Thunberg's little gig, innit? That's what she's all about. Plenty of chemtrails in Dorset, says Jane. What, all week? Tuesday, Wednesday too? Interesting. Cloud formations are so different too from when I was a child. Well, they are, aren't they? But I mean, this is another thing. They've been doing it a long time. 60s they started doing this. Now, ARP, I think, didn't kick off until 96. Or actually, the woodpecker signal, wasn't it, that first were picked up by the Radio Am guys. 96, I think, and that were coming out of Russia. So that's the first time they sort of recognised this odd signal. And they called it the woodpecker. So that were from coming out of Russia. And then, of course, we got the major ARP system up there in Alaska. But they're all over the world, if you look now. You can, I mean, if you go on Google Maps, you can see them. Somebody put something up on Facebook the other week. They'd gone through a forest somewhere here on Blighty and found a small version of an ARP system. I mean, even though it was small, I mean, the potency of it would have been quite remarkable. But that were in a forest somewhere in Old Blighty. He should have smashed it up, really. But that's naughty, isn't it? But you know what I'm saying. He didn't. But he did film it and showed it. All week here, very hazy sun, then cloudy. So you didn't get a break Tuesday, Wednesday then, Jane? Oh, that's interesting. Must have maybe you're just up north for some reason, but you were absolutely roasting. I were eating it. Yeah, it were roasting. And then they started again on the Thursday, and then they've been doing it ever since, and now we've got rain. So if people have been paying attention, you could see it clearly there. No trails, you get the sun properly, as it's meant to be. So welcome everybody. So yeah, keep your eyes on what's going on in the cult down there in the Middle East. And keep your eyes on what's going on your own terraformer. Because they are certainly encouraging this other deceptive cult to start to act out its real art, which is dark, evil, deceptive, and full of shit, if they're following the book. So keep your eyes out for that, folks, and don't let it don't let it achieve anything. You know, men have to get back together. Like Ireland now, the Irish seem to be pulling in a little bit. And, you know, just making sure that the dipsticks of these people are not getting away with being dipsticks. You know, the wicked man scenario, remember that. It's biblical. You're in your right to deal with the wicked man. Not the wicked man in accordance with the fake father, the one that runs the Vatican corporate state that we're all tied to on the trust system. The heavenly father, the one that came before the Elohim and created the Elohim. You've got to keep these in mind, because this is the actual true spiritual law. Remember, everything works to that biblical text, regardless of whether you believe it, whether you accept it, whether you like it, or you don't like it. The whole system of the entire world operates in accordance with that book. But of course, it's deceptive in that it depends what level you see it at. They're seeing it correctly, and they've obfuscated the real laws and given you the secondary laws that stop you from actually dealing with them in the right manner. You know, the Englishman's home is his castle was taken from the Bible, in the fact that you are within your rights to defend yourself, defend your family, defend your property against the wicked man. And that's anybody that's acting contrary. And all these immigrants are acting contrary, and you're going to start to see it now, because what they pretended to be all these years isn't. That's wickedness in and of itself, by definition of that deception. And this is what has been lost in these crazy translations of the biblical text. Now, that's not saying that go out there and beat people. I'm just saying you have the right, regardless of what government says, regardless of what this Vatican corporate state father says, because they're full of shit. All their rules are set so you don't stop them carrying out this mimic fake agenda. But we have to get back on what is real spiritual law. What is it we are expected to be and to do while we are here? And bending over and lying down and crying your eyeballs out isn't. You have a duty to deal with the wicked man. And that's deception, it's aggression, anything that's overt and contrary to the laws of the land is a sign of a wicked man, of a wicked woman. And that has to be started to be seen in that way. Otherwise, you're going to go the way of Bolshevik Russia or Bolshevik China, Cambodia, the African nations during the 70s. That's the way it goes, and it is down to us. Mark says, 2XL is the name of one of the chemtrail companies. 2XL. There's quite a lot of them, to be fair. AMG Maniac says, I've spent the last part of the summer on Dartmoor, and it's been easy to see when they start manipulating the weather. Yeah, I mean, when I first started cataloguing that, which would have been about 2008, every morning on my websites, what you could see then, what they used to do were, if there were a weather front coming in, they'd trail before it to change it one way or another, either to dissipate it or to expand the moisture or to expand the severity of the winds. You could definitely see that. Because in the main here it comes in from the west, but every now and again it'd come up from the south. And if it was coming up from the south, it would be where Manchester, they'd trail all over Manchester and do the grid patterns. But as a general rule, in the mornings they'd do it over Blackpool, Southport, where looking from where I was living, before the weather front. So, but then we can do it direct over everything, and again it depends on what they do. Are they spraying to give you some diseases, or they just... And also when you get into ARP and all these systems, a lot of what they do is they have to put metal particulates in the atmosphere, and it turns the whole atmosphere then into part of the weapon system that ARP is and USAT. And there's various things that these systems do as well. It's not just all weather manipulation. They can turn the atmosphere into a sort of a giant radar so that they can see into your homes and such and they got the helicopters that they come out with. Now got the drones everywhere. I don't think people are realising the degree to which they're using these drones, especially the police. I've seen quite a few here from where I am. At night as well, even. And you only get to know they're there if they're flying pretty low, because you can hear them and they do have a flashing light on. But you only have to get to a certain height and you're not going to see them. And consider some of the quality of these military cameras they've got. I think they're doing a lot more than people think with these drones. Fat Henry says, in Wakefield, Wednesdays and Fridays are the worst days for chemtrails. Last week, no different. They're always bad over farmland areas in West Yorkshire. Well, if you get into the data, the patents they've got, it's that they're putting in these metals and it's changing the pH of the soil. Now, if you get into what Monsanto were doing before it became Bayer, they were creating specific genetically modified crops, specifically genetically modified cattle, sheep, and all farm animals. So CJD, foot and mouth, and all these diseases take on an all new meaning when you start to consider that actually they were removing the old stock and putting in these genetically modified. Now, of course, everything that they do that's genetically modified, that modification is patented to these companies. So Cargill, which is a huge food grain conglomerate, and when I looked into that years ago, I think the House of Windsor had a major share in that, which means, because of course Queen Elizabeth, being a member of the Middle Temple, that everything she were pulling in through the Middle Temple into the Inner Temple, which is moving to Kazakhstan. Yeah, so everything she gained in Canada, across the US, Australia, New Zealand, anything, whether it's land or whether it's patents or whether it's crops, all was being pulled in through her person into the Inner Temple of the inner city of London. Yeah, that's what you've got to see, that game that we're going on there. So when you see Windsor's big shareholders or Queen Elizabeth a big shareholder in this, it's only a facilitator. It's only what you might call, well, a facilitator is a correct term. Facilitating that by using the position of the so-called English monarch to move in those assets, those titles, those patents into the Inner Temple in the inner city, which of course we looked at before, didn't we not? Originally it was a Christian temple and it was sanctified to Mary, whereas at some point after the Angevins got really stuck in after 1066, it became a mimic of Solomon's temple, so clearly there was a shift of doctrine, probably more than likely after the Civil War era in England, when the banking system, the East India Company's headquarters, all moved into the inner city, and then it became a moneylender's paradise. So probably that was the point at which it really did start to change into this this debt and compound interest banking system. Because previous to that, there was no Bank of England. It was just Royal Mints. Unfortunately, though, when you get into that, it was the Venetians that basically controlled most of the Royal Mints, at least since 1100s anyway. I think that's when they got their first mint, if I remember rightly. But the Venetians had the Angevins, all the Angevins that came over 1066, in their pocket from the get-go. Yeah, so everything that QE2 apparently did was only really a front, a carrier, if you will, to pull in all the assets afforded to what was classed as the British Empire, which was nothing of the sort. It was a Holy See endeavour into this new Inner Temple, which you might say was probably, you could say, is actually the Third Temple. So the Third Temple's been built for a very long time. it's just for the biblical symbology. They have to erect a physical one in Jerusalem, wherever that's going to be. Because, of course, if you sing the songs of the old Protestants, Jerusalem was going to be built on England's pleasant, blah, blah, blah. So Jerusalem in and of itself can be any fucking where. Anywhere they choose. And everybody assumes it's going to be in the Middle East, when, of course, my guess is that it would probably be finalised in Khazaria or Ukraine, where the Sanhedrin intends to control this Noahide system as a body of judges over and above all the non-Jews, or the Goyim, as they call everybody. So that would be my guess from what I can see. Jerusalem can be anywhere at any particular time. It doesn't really matter because, of course, it's hidden in the secret society cults, isn't it? It's the Bible's the public consumption, but the secret societies is the sort of hidden games that play out with that. You can see now, I saw something last week put on Facebook where you got the Templars giving it the big, oh, well, we've had Jesus and all this lot, and his kids have got long heads. Yeah, okay. It's like, you know, when have you ever seen some great famous guy who was a superior in his field? When did his son or his daughter ever follow suit? It's not a genetic thing, what you might call genius or what you might call spiritual advancement. It doesn't necessarily pass from father to son or to daughter by genes. You know, spiritual enhancement is something that you achieve in and of yourself as a character. So, bloodlines, does it really matter? No, I don't think it does at all, because it's down to the individual whether they shift and ascend themselves while they're down here or not. It's not tied to blood. And that, of course, is why so many of these bloodlines are fruitcakes. They believe it is, when in fact it's not the case at all. They're just being passed on knowledge that they've kept to themselves that keeps them separate from everybody else because they know the secrets and the rest don't. So that's basically as I see it anyway. March, sounds to me exhale for inhale, one hell. This is Benefactor. I was asked to look into them about 2 years ago. When I did, the directors were linked to stuff I'd already done, says Mark. David says the Queen needed the permission of the Mayor of the City of London. Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's its own sovereign land, is the inner city, as is the Vatican state system. You know, I mean, I tried to get across in these last few live streams how there's a difference between what the Vatican is now since Vatican II, or actually since 1929, but overtly since 64-3 when they got Vatican II in. And this is where Malachi Martin's important, because he was telling the faithful in the 90s what had happened, why things were going to change, and it cited the Fatima secrets as not being achieved in the time from 1917 to 1960. So, Malachi Martin had a real solid foundation to what he was writing about, even though he made it a bit more like a sort of a fantasy sometimes. But actually, if you were reading between the lines and you knew and understood the tradition, then what Malachi Martin was telling you is exactly what has happened, that the Vatican does no longer represent any ideals of what we would have expected the actual church to have represented. And that was back in the 90s, and he said it happened even earlier than that. So there's a separation, and this was seen by the Catholics leaving the Catholic Church in the 70s, because the Vatican, under Vatican II, is 100% subservient in its law to the Russian Orthodox Church in its entirety. And so you've got this Kabbalah system running everything. It runs the Vatican now, the corporate state. It's running Judaism. It's running Zionism. It's running China. In India, it's running Islam, through the Talmud. It's pretty much running everything, and it's been in the church for a long time. The Talmud is what oversaw the Inquisition across Europe. So people say, oh, they only just took it over. No, it's been in there a long time. But the Inquisition was carried out by the Dominicans. So it was more of a monk kind of gig, if you know what I'm saying. But while it always threatened to be operating for the church, even though they classed that as a separation in their own minds, it's Dominicans doing it, Jesuits after that. That's where it got tied in. So the more they used it, the more it became the main game for these power institutions. And here we are today. David says, to enter the city, the Queen did. Yes, she did. So, Mrs. Hi, Sean, sorry I'm late. Was watching Mood Tie. I'll go back and watch from the start later. Apple is accepted. Thanks, Solomist. How you doing, mate? Satanis Vaticanus just made the up sounding good. Well, Vaticana, I think she's called, Vatica. And that was a Etruscan goddess, which is what race were on there before Rome were formed, and of course the Etruscans. From what I've studied anyway, pretty much stand out as clearly Phoenicians, which of course, moneylenders, the Carthaginians, all these people we don't really like, Baal worshippers, So it makes sense that, as Abe Finkelstein said, that these guys have been in it from the beginning. It's not, they were in it at the beginning, and they gave it the church Latin. So, as I said, Abe Finkelstein, you might not like what he's saying, but he was being genuine on that show. He wasn't hiding anything. He wasn't giving too much away, but he gave more than enough away. If you can see what he said. And that guy, he said, it's always going to be a go-to for anybody that wants to just check, are they doing this? Go and have a look at what Abe said, because you can guarantee he probably touched on it one way or another in that interview. So, and like the other guy that were in there, the Yahweh guy, giving it the big, well, Yahweh didn't come until Genesis 2. And people forget this. You've got Genesis 1, which we looked at the other week, is actually beyond the Elohim. The father of the beginnings, who created the Elohim. Well, Yahweh is not in there. He's nothing to do with that. Whether you take the original translation, including the Aleph, or even the second one with the Beth, Yahweh isn't in there. He doesn't come into it until Genesis 2. The garden God. And of course the garden, the Eden. Who is it that's taking you out, fixing you to this earthly father, this that we now call the Pope? They're a fake father figure. They've took the word family, so you can't use that term because they just accept it as their family. Parent is their word. Child is their word. Infant is their word. And as soon as you tie yourself in, then use the word father and he's the father. We looked at that last week. It's a very important live stream that last week. And I think the fact that I got no comments from anybody via email in the week tells me that you people have not really seen the importance of the data in last week's live stream. That is such an important live stream that we'll use that as another reference now for future. Again, so we've got the correct translation to the Genesis one, and we've got the last week's live stream, and then there's subtleties in the Twilight Zone live stream as well, if you pick them up. So with those three now, in essence, there's parts of that, especially, but all the last weeks, that are going to become like a new footing in order I can try and explain certain things as we move forward with these live streams. Because last week's was a very, very important live stream, and I know people haven't actually recognised the importance of it, but that's fine. We'll use that as a point of reference as we move forward in these lives, especially when it comes to understanding the Bible a bit more in tune with how the elites see it rather than what they've force-fed the minions so that you don't attack their power base. I mean, a bit like Sean Ross says, I haven't watched Sean for quite a long time, I don't know whether he's alright or not, but he used to say that Moses' laws were Pharaoh's laws to stop you from, well, he's quite correct in the way that they were presented, i.e. do not kill when actually it's do not murder. But just swaps like that, once it becomes embedded, is enough to stop you from dealing spiritually with the wicked man. And depending on what wickedness you're dealing with, depends on your reaction. But we've really been disarmed in that sense, not just physically, but mentally, in relation to what it is we are actually expected to do and be down here. Cos wasn't here last week. Where were you, Baden? Benefact says Eden, where you are eaten. Oh, yeah. Spot on. Not much to eat after a cataclysm, says Solomist. The Lone Rizzler. Evening, Sean, and all late tonight. Apologies, not a problem. Right, so I've just put a mix together tonight in sort of, because honestly I always like to put together a PDF now. It's really good because you can go back to it on referencing as we move forward with these live streams in relation to the biblical. But I think there's so much of this Bolshevism going on now, and I know most people, especially the youngsters, they have absolutely no concept of what Bolshevism is. In the same sense, they don't really understand the Second World War. But then that's not saying the baby boomers understood it either, because they didn't. They just got sucked into the propaganda. But these younger generations they're so far away from, and the fact that they didn't have the grandparents in their lives, most of them these days, they didn't get the carry through from the old knowledge, which is essential to keep your nation together. Again, another deliberate move in the breakup of the family by these Bolshevists. And of course, the Fabian Society was a major part of this setting up this Bolshevist system on England and Scotland. And of course, the Fabians were set up in Adelphi House in London, which was originally the home of the Hanoverians, as I've said. And I put this together, I think I first put it together about 2009, and then carried it forward onto this new website. And they're back in 2015. But for most people in the Western world, the term Fabian brings forth thoughts of social responsibility for the people by the people. Fabian ideology is the Trojan horse from which the Committee of 300 Families have suckered the majority of working and middle-class families in socialist platforms. By the actions, we see it to be an aspect of the 10-headed monster, heralding in the communist system, and the shift to destroy all forms of self-sufficiency, the ability to keep industry alive and to legalise the destruction of the human race under the eugenics doctrine. These are all come through this Fabian Royal Society pseudo-scientific extravaganza. This will be achieved with your consent under contract to accept full responsibility for geoengineering, birthed climate change. They are creating a super state to which we all will be tethered, a state that they and their leaders will control. Now, of course, I wrote this in 2008, so we can see it now because we're so far further on. But back then, the internet wasn't really awash with this kind of stuff. It hadn't connected all these organisations. Jeremy Corbyn is the new darling of the Labour massive, a socialist who appears to be of the balanced kind, and yet we must consider the fact that the Fabians love him. Watching Prime Minister's Question Time a couple of weeks ago, I saw Corbyn. Whilst mild-mannered and calm in his speak, Jeremy Corbyn did nothing other than heralding the British Houses of Parliament, the United Nations directives. Every single time he stood up, that man, that's all he did. Never spoke about English law, anything English, British, Scottish, just United Nations. So how far do Corbyn's communist protocols actually go? To support the UN, one's leanings are to mass murder, medical interventions and administration of concentration camps, also called refugee camps, in nations torn asunder by war carried out by another arm of the UN, NATO. They gather displaced populations, medically segregate, vaccinate, and then decide what part of the world they will be sent as a part of the Kalergi plan for the mass migration of third world peoples. In this world, there's a clear link between the Fabian Society and the road to a Soviet-style communism. But we can also better understand the Fabians when we consider the involvement of capitalism. They headquarter within the John Adams Street Gang complex at Adelphi House in London. And, you know, I've pulled this up many times. It's so important, this place. It's because even the London School of Economics, which is another... Oh, for God's sake. I don't know why. There's something funny going on with some of these pages for some reason. I think somebody's been in this. A lot of links have gone off these reports over the years. But never mind. So the London School of Economics is another operation classed as socialist that comes out of this Adelphi House, which of course is uber capitalist because it was the place or home of the Hanoverians. Controlled opposition is an essential requirement when one seeks to confound. Socialism v capitalism is a scam, orchestrated by the same composers. It is two ends of the same wand, and the stage is conducted from Adelphi by the corporate crown. The city, known to insiders to be none other than the global network of the Khazarian Mafia. The Fabian Society set up London School of Economics within the John Adams Street web, and just for a little insight, one of my favourite bands, the Rolling Stones, were funded into existence by the LSE. Adelphi, LSE, London Web Art begins at life Adelphi. Let's see if that link takes us anywhere. Oh, it does. So, oh, it's scribbled, so you've got to piss about to get into that. Yeah, they're sort of blocking everything now, aren't they, for you to get in? You've got to... Where's that gone? Well, so I've just got that up. Fabian. Oh, wait a minute, wrong bloody keyboard. Fabians. Okay, I'll get back to that. So yeah. So it's all UN, it's all everything, but UN, as we know, comes out of this Vatican corporate state. Yeah, everything just comes out of this place. Agora projects in China also, which London School of Economics is very big in. So again, Adam House, and that's China. And there's a lot more interesting aspects to this tale that is going live as I write. Labour as a political party has a real and dangerous battle going on for its soul, as the Jewish arm battles with the new incumbent force, Islam, for the power to move it against the British people. And there's a study on there. On this page, we'll briefly summarise a fantastic book written by John D. Christian, first published in New Zealand in 2009. Wolf in Sheep's Clothing. In Rome, he, Porphyry, was widely known as a leading bitter opponent of Christianity and a defender of Greek-Roman paganism. It is not just a coincidence that his book Philosophy from the Oracles was written and published just before the persecutions were initiated by Diocletian and Galerius. In fact, it set the basis for them. Of his work, Adversus Christianos, Against the Christians, in 15 books, only fragments remain. In these writings, he is famously quoted as saying, "The gods have proclaimed Christ to have been most pious, but the Christians are a confused and vicious sect." Porphyry was, like Pythagoras, a green radical advocate of vegetarianism on spiritual and ethical grounds. He and Pythagoras are the most famous radical vegetarians of classical antiquity. Porphyry wrote De abstenentia on abstinence and De non necandis ad epilandum animantibus on the impropriety of killing living beings for food, advocating the philosophy against the consumption of animal meat, and he is widely cited with approval in vegetarian literature up to the present day. Indeed, even here in New Zealand, where this author resides, the main vegan group in the country, based in Christchurch, calls itself Porphyry's People. On the website www.veganorg.New Zealand, they describe themselves as promoting veganism to further ethical, health and ecological goals, and include a quote from Fabian, George Bernard Shaw. Not only was Shaw vegetarian on spiritual grounds, he was the founding member of the socialist Fabian Society, and the one who created the society's coat of arms, a wolf in sheep's clothing. Another well-known occult associate of his at the Fabian Society and Freemason was Annie Besant, who was also a vegetarian. Now, Annie Besant was a psychic very involved in the Theosophical Society. In the foreword to the second edition of his book, published in 2000, Gore said, "None of our measures will willfully succeed unless we achieve population stabilisation, one of the most important environmental challenges of all. An overcrowded world is inevitably a polluted one." This statement he borrowed from Prince Philip, who wrote the foreword to the book People as Animals. Now then, we looked at that, didn't we? Monster, human concept, now classed as animals, because there's been some changes in recent years, especially this year, on the definition of human in relation to how the United Nations has seen it. Now, I've just reminded myself of that. I will pull that together for next week's live stream, because what they're doing is turning the human into an animal, which is how they're going to pull it into this new ark, the Noahide, yeah? Noah's new ark. So animals went in 2 by 2, remember this. So they're going to get you down to the level of animal by your own consent, through ignorance. Prince Philip has always aligned himself with the beliefs of British Fabian socialists, like Lord Bertrand Russell, who defined the world's alleged overpopulation as the greatest threat to the ruling oligarchy of all. Among Prince Philip's closest collaborators was Sir Julian Huxley, president of the Eugenics Society. That's Aldous Huxley's brother. And Julian became head of the UNICEF. And Huxley's wife, Proper Fruitcake, she was very involved in the kids' schools, encouraging veganism, encouraging kids to caress old people. Very sinister, very twisted stuff. But anybody that knows about the Huxleys, you already know that. And also, Sir David Attenborough, people, you know, he's a massive eugenicist. You know, he was once the president of the, what's it called? Optimum Population Trust, which I've shown on live streams before. The guy's a serious eugenicist and evolutionist to keep you fixed into that fake science. So Sir Julian Huxley, president of the Eugenics Society, who, unlike Hitler, tried to promote his mass genocide and anti-human ideologies through conservation. So this conservation garbage is all about genocide. That he brought to the UN in his role as the first head of the United Nations Education, Social and Cultural Organisation, or UNESCO. As a result of Al Gore's admiration of Prince Charles' green policies, on the 28th of January 2007, he and actress Meryl Streep presented the Prince with the Global Environmental Citizen Award from Harvard. The two Miliband brothers are big on Fabian agendas. Now, one of the Miliband brothers, Ed, is back in this Bolshevik Stormers Brigade. Ed Miliband, in his 2011 speech to the Fabian Society, said, "The prize is not simply a Labour government, but more than that. It's about a political movement that in every community up and down this country can shape the politics of the future, make our values and our ideas the common sense of our age, and shape a country and a world based on our ideals." And there's a link to his full speech if it hasn't been broken. Now again, common sense. Now common purpose this is where common purpose was involved in this creating future leaders. It's all tied into this Fabian communist garbage. The dark half of the duo, David Miliband, the former Labour Secretary of State and for Foreign and Commonwealth Affairs in the British government, David Miliband has worked closely with Prince Charles, pushing his green policies through the British government's Foreign Affairs Department. David's parents were both Polish Jews who moved to England during and after the Second World War. His father, Adolf, changed his name to Ralph after moving to London during the war, and in the summer of 1940 he visited Karl Marx's grave in Highgate Cemetery, where he swore an oath to him. Inspired by the writing of the Marxist Jew Harold Laski, Miliband successfully applied to work with Laski at the Fabian Society's London School of Economics and Political Science, or LSE, in 1941. In 1949 he became assistant lecturer in political science at the LSE, where he remained until 1972. By this time he had become one of the world's leading Marxist Fabian socialist thinkers. During the 1980s, he and others were involved in various Chesterfield socialist conferences, out of which emerged the independent Green Left magazine Red Pepper, and that's 1994. Today, Ralph Miliband is remembered at the LSE each year through the Ralph Miliband Programme lectures, and every 3 years there is a Miliband Scholarship in Political Sociology offered. The Miliband Programme lectures for 2007 and 8 were entitled Oil, Energy, Security and Global Order Series. Lectures for these series, Lord John Brown, former Chief Executive of BP, Professor Michael Clare, the Five Colleges Professor of Peace and World Security Studies at Hampshire College, and author of Blood and Oil, the Zionist Professor Nicholas Stern, Professor of Economics and Director of the Asia Research Centre at LSE, and former Chief Economist and Senior Vice President of the World Bank from 2000 to 2003, and lastly, the Right Honourable David Miliband himself. The LSE is the Global Operation Nerve Centre and think tank of the Fabian Society, which since it was formed has directly controlled the policies of the British, Australian and New Zealand Labour parties, and indirectly just about every major socialist government in the world. Fabians were also responsible for introducing communism to Russia and China. Many of Prince Charles' socialist environmental green policies introduced at a government level have come directly through the LSE. Although Ralph Miliband died in 1994, his son David is now following closely in his father's footsteps. Stalin's 5-year plan to destroy farmers and agriculture. Contrary to most socialist deceptive claims that their ideology is only just a political one rather than a spiritual one, socialism is in fact a pagan religion based on the worship of the same old Babylonian, Egyptian, Greco-Roman. So, where am I? I thought my live stream had gone off then. I've got a bit lost here. Of the Greco-Roman sun god and Mother Earth goddess deities. Fabian socialism, communism, Marxism and fascism are all birds of the same feather. They all worship the same deities, have the same socialist beliefs, the same goals, but have different ways in getting there. Of all types of socialism, Fabian socialism is by far the most insidious of all. Fabian socialism is a subtle mix of both communism and fascism. But unlike communism and fascism, which are directly confrontational and revolutionary, Fabianism deceptively aims to achieve the same objectives gradually through consensus with the will of the people and use force only as a last resort. Because of this gradual approach, it's much more insidious and it's often difficult to recognise in its early stages. That's the deceptive side, the subversive side of communism. So anything that's subversive in its nature, so that's Zionism and that's Islam, are in sync with this communist game. Both Karl Marx and Hitler were themselves great students of Plato. Not only is Prince Charles a great student of Plato, he believes himself to be that philosopher king. The United Nations organisation is founded along the same lines of Plato's socialist teachings. Socrates, Plato and Aristotle were vegetarians, sun god and Mother Earth goddess worshippers, environmentalists and tree huggers by faith. The numbers of famous Fabian socialists who have been and are vegetarians is outstanding. The Fabian Society was founded in London in 1884 by Neoplatonists, Platonists and Christian socialists. Karl Marx's daughter Eleanor was one of the early members. Over the last 120 years, Fabian Society members have been almost singularly responsible for creating communism in Soviet Russia and Communist China, fascism in Italy and Germany, and socialism generally throughout the world. The Society's chief training school is the London School of Economics and Political Science. Fabians were involved in setting up the League of Nations and the United Nations and the EU. British Fabians were responsible for crafting Stalin's devilish 5-year plans in the Soviet Union, which murdered millions and destroyed farming and agriculture, exactly what they're doing now, here. And America, Australia, New Zealand, in the Ukraine, in Europe as a whole, including Holland. The draft of the plan was published in a book entitled All These Things by a New Zealand author and journalist, A.N. Field. The book was first published in 1936 by Omni Publications in the United States and censored in New Zealand. During the famine, George Bernard Shaw, one of the leading founders of the British Fabian Society in London, and the man who designed the Society's coat of arms, a wolf in sheep's clothing, along with a group of British socialists, visited the Soviet Union and were given a 5-day tour of the Ukraine, visiting a model collective farm. He returned to Britain with a favourable impression and declared there was no famine. This is the fruit of socialism: starvation, death and madness. Today, led by the British aristocracy, members of the Fabian Society and London School of Economics, it is not the Marxist 5-year plan, military thugs and secret police of Stalin that farmers have to worry about. It is now the British Fabian fascist policies of the City of London Corporation, multinational corporations and banks that are now wealthier than many countries, in collusion with the UN, that are monopolising farming and food distribution on a global scale, that are disenfranchising the small private middle class farmers out of their livelihood and driving them off their properties. While it's true that all socialism, be it fascism, Marxism, communism, Christian socialism or Fabian socialism, are all the same in that they are all based around the worship of the pagan sun god and the Mother Earth goddess, Prince Charles' particular version of socialism is more a merger of neo-Nazi fascism, with the fascist state leader working with big business and corporations, and Fabian socialism, where the state leader introduces his socialist policies gradually, rather than by direct revolution or confrontation like Marxism. And there is the book in full. Okay, and then we've got big players, list: Gordon Brown, Tony Blair, Al Wilson, Tony Benn, Richard Crossman, Anthony Crossland, Clement Attlee, Harold Lasky, G.D.H. Cole, R.H. Tony, Bertrand Russell, Emmeline Pankhurst, Sidney Oliver, Hubert Bland, Graham Wallace, Beatrice Webb, H.G. Wells, Edward Peace, Havelock Ellis, John Davison, Edward Carpenter, Julia Gillard, who was a one-time Australian Prime Minister. And then we've got a study connected. We've got the Georgia Lukács and the Frankfurt School, Fabian's Women's Network, Tunbridge and Tunbridge Wells Fabian Society, Lister Fabian Socialist Australia, Manchester Fabians, the OVI team, Fabian Society membership, British Fabian Society dynastic banking families in the City of London's, financed the communist takeover of Russia, Fabian, and they did through Wall Street, Fabian Society and the real threat of the United Nations. And so basically this is where a lot of this stuff comes from, this complete and utter Jewish takeover of the inner city, the Jesuit takeover as it were as well, the East India companies, and everything was centralised there that's classed as communism. And they set it across the world. And they have nothing to do with the English because, of course, there's an old saying, not all Jews are communists, but all communists are Jews. And that still holds true today, although they've captured a lot of fruit bats, non-Jewish people to the cause through such as common purpose. So that's just an insight into the Fabians. They're a nasty bunch, a very, very nasty bunch, and you wouldn't want to let them unleash the game fully like they did across Russia, in China, Cambodia, across Africa. It's not something that we can afford to let unleash here. You see, of course, they've got an extra arm here today, and that's this political Islam. And that is the power they've got, which doesn't have you looking at this system as the purveyor of what's all around us, because they've managed to capture, well, I mean, they've controlled it for a long, long time through Carthage, but Sunni Islam is just 100% an arm of this system. Anything that's hive mind, communist, fascist is, and I mean, it's just another banking system, you know what I mean? The massive banks, as I've said, and they extort the money for that bank from their own populations. So, you know, the idea that they talk, oh, it's interest free, yeah, well, that's fine, but you're only giving it to them that are going to spread your bank by buying up properties in whatever land it is you're trying to take over, while pretending you're actually a cult of peace. And of course, the universe is showing us now that that's the case, because they're now starting to act it out. So there we go. Now, let's have a little look. What have we got here with this Labour government? I'll run this through for you. You can have a little listen and a look at this, because this is what's now sitting in power in Chalker, Westminster.
bit. Work it just a little 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 bit.
Certainly not the best, are they? Not the best bunch you want sitting down there in Charcoal, Westminster. Well, just remember, the Tories made sure they got in. So Boris and all this Farage, all these people that claim to be against it, they made sure this bunch got in because they're all working for the same Privy Council. And people must remember this, or at least acknowledge it, because there is no separation of parties. They're all on the same team. Privy Council. All of them. And that's the way it is. Where are we? So, the Lone Rizzler says, late tonight, no problem. Meander V. So Gnosticism is closer to how things function, if I understand correctly. Well, it's how they are the elite side of things. Yeah, I mean, they're holding the knowledge that they've picked up from the actual spiritual knowledge. And they've given us a load of shit to keep us under control and be satisfied with what we're offering. But in the old game, the system works. If you proved yourself worthy, if you rose yourself up, the doors would open. And as we looked last week, when the man came, he was saying, you're blocking, you're not letting it work, you're not playing the game as it's supposed to be played, that you're blocking people. Well, this is where we're at again today. They're trying to take it over again. It's always this temple. And it's always this temple that's the problem. And so this chosen race, as it were, is chosen by the fucking devil. It always has been. You know, it's why they get thrown out of nations forever and ever, amen, when you look back in history. Because this is what they do. And they do it subversively. That's why it gets so far, because they're operating under the Talmud. Same with Islam, they're operating the Talmud. It's a subversive operation. Everything they tell you is a lie, because that's not what's going on. And, you know, the population is so bedazzled by bollocks. Now you're going to get to start to see it as they start to express the dark art and thrust themselves upon you. And I've said before, what's really worrying is the fact that our militaries are out, tied to NATO. It's not them that are going to be dealing with the civil unrest. It's going to be these foreigners working for the UN. That's when it's going to get rather crap. Do you know what I'm saying? And this is why they're expressing the right now. They're brave now. They think they've got the numbers. So the cowards, basically. This is how cowardice works. It has to do it by a subversion. So the white uncles are going to have to, and the blacks as well, because this is aimed at you guys. They've enslaved more Africans, the Arabs, in their time than they've enslaved any other culture, at least for the last 1,000 years. Before that, they were mainly white slaves that they hunted down. But, you know, this is we're going to have to start to wise up here. And these divisions they've got going on, especially between the whites and the blacks, you're not going to change the division that they've got with all these subcultures they've just brought in. But I'm talking about English-born, American-born, black people and white people. You know, we have more in common than we do have off common, even though for the last 10 years they've been pushing this division. We still have more in common because we have a lot in common. We have music in common, we have art in common, we have this kind of stuff all in common because we have either or, and we want to be able to, you know, the black culture and its genius in music and such creativity would never have got anywhere if it didn't for white unkies systems that have been taken over by these small hats again, as we knew through the time of John Wayne when he was telling everybody that the communists were taking over Hollywood and the entertainment industry. It hasn't always been so. So we have a lot more in common than certain quarters would like us to remember, I would suggest. But these cults, this Talmud enslaves everybody, not like it. There is no middle ground. There's no halfway house. And with Islam, it's when they get the numbers and they feel brave, then they say, well, we can fight, you know. Convert. If you say no, you say, okay, you pay tax. If you don't want to pay them tax or jizya, then they war you. They go to war. They kill the males and enslave the females. That's the doctrine. They didn't tell you that, did they? No, because they're hiding it. They're pretending that they're a religion of peace. Unfortunately, it isn't. If they follow the book. If they're following the book, that's what it is. It isn't. If they're trying to be peaceful, it's because they've took on the Christian ethos while they've been living in the West. But ultimately, when it comes to A, lads, E, are they going to follow the book? If they are, then that's exactly what they're going to be. Because that's the book. Yep. Yeah, if you've not read it, you don't know. I'd suggest you read it. Then you don't have to believe you know. Where are we here? Fabian Society has a lot to do with humanism and the foreign policy departments, yeah? Absolutely, it's all about that. Frankfurt School, Royal Society, all these orders that came over to Blighty after the Civil War. You can trace it all coming in from that, all in. This fake pseudo garbage nonsense. Oswald Mosley portrayed in Peaky Blinders as depicted as a charismatic and manipulative politician. Well, when I look back into my clans on my grandfather's side, they funded Oswald Mosley, and I think a bit like Hitler, we've been presented this picture of these people, and it's been embedded in us by these same people that we know we can see not acting correctly, that we now know are liars. And I think the same with Oswald Mosley. He's had this picture projected and painted of him in the same way they did with Enoch Powell, but yet if you listen to what he was saying, you couldn't really argue the toss with him. I used to, you know, my granddad were into all that, and I respect my grandfather. So I'd listen to what he had to say, and he was a big supporter of that side of things. our nation and national identity depending on us being what today they class as racist or nationalist. It's how you protect your nations. Otherwise, it doesn't work. Look what's happened when we've let go of that. We've let go of the power of the family. That's what happens. These freaks come in and start secretly setting up a power base. But it's also dependent on the inhabitants being thick as folk, of not watching the game, which is what's been happening since, well, you could say since after First World War, especially so after the Second World War, because everything were done for them. Everybody got their ass wiped. So, yeah, I don't know. I have studied Oswald Mosley, but of course back then you still had this overriding anything German. You know, we were brainwashed as kids not to give any quarter to Germans. But of course, as I started to educate myself, I could see the game wasn't as it is, and I know I have a good friend who's a German, and it's good. It's nice because what a load of bollocks, all that malarkey. The insanity of the First and Second World War is that an outside culture and race managed to persuade us, the Germans and the English and the French and the Italians and the Scandinavians and the Dutch to go to war against each other. How pathetic. That's the real insanity of the 20th century, in my now educated opinion. That was the catastrophe, that an outside culture managed to persuade us to basically annihilate each other. And now look at the state of us today. Because together as we were, and I'm not saying we were in each other's pockets, but not at war, Northern Europe, and Europe in its entirety, was an exceptionally powerful civilization. For itself. It wasn't until this imperial force, again, this same outside culture came along and started to persuade people, let's go and invade other countries, nick the women and nick the wealth, which came out of the Holy See. Spanish first, off they went. Portuguese actually were the first colonisers, then the Spanish, then the Dutch, and then they got the claws onto England. And yeah, that's basically what happened. But it took a civil war here to get that here. It took a civil war to demolish what was England. In the same way, it took a civil war in America to pull in the United States as a corporation. The same mechanic. We were so solid in our civilizations before they managed to persuade us to go and war against each other. Yeah, it's sad. It really is sad. Mark says, common purpose fucking stinks. Well, I mean, you don't hear much of it anymore, but I'm pretty sure it's morphed into something else. But yeah, total communist cult. Opus Dei, I found when Brian brought that to our attention back in the day, and that what I kept finding everywhere in with that was Opus Dei more than anything. A real powerful cult within the Vatican system. And they, I found, were in everything. A common purpose you found behind that were Opus Dei. Everywhere. That's what I found. So, they were a twisted bunch. I mean, they were into wearing torture implements on their legs and shit. You know, proper twisted shitbags. Cause 973 gives it the old muse. Gordon Fiala says, has government paid for advice XD? Well, it has, hasn't it, really? What a lineup, exactly. What a lineup indeed. I mean, there's every twisted shitbag, dumbass, fruit bat. I mean, I've never liked Labour people all growing up because they were just working class, stupid people. Thick people. Like, you know, I worked at Lang's and the, what were they called, the union rep. Knew everything about the union rep and rights, which were fine, don't get me wrong, but they were backward. they were intelligent people. And that's how I found Labour people on the ground were all like that. So that the leaders, these communist leaders in that session, it were a piece of piss for them to do what they were doing, because the minions were too fucking stupid to even recognise it. You know, at least the Conservatives, before they wrecked it after the Eurosceptic scandals, these people were intelligent people. These people understood nationalism. These people understood what it takes to keep your nation together. This is why they were all Eurosceptics. And this is why I've always been that mindset, a conservative mindset. I couldn't possibly have ever been a socialist, because they were creepy people. I mean, here in Ironbin, the guys that were sort of in the game when I was growing up, they were really, you could see it in them, you know. I mean, obviously I didn't have this grammar then of communist and socialist and all this, but they were sinister people. Very, very sinister people, because Labour's always had a big stronghold up here in the north because, of course, of all the working class. And my man were a working class hero, that kind of an attitude, and he just used to make me laugh, you know. They were like, oh, fucking hell. You know, they were fixed, they were so fixed to it, that mindset. You know, you don't wave with your fucking hands, you're not a fucking man. And it's like, honestly, you know, and they believed it. Miners, mill workers, everybody mad over a builder, but they were like just so pathetic. And of course, John Lang's were a Knights of Malta operation, which is why they built all the hospitals. And that were actually the first bunch that sort of approached me that I recognised. But them days I weren't savvy with any of this stuff at all. Didn't know me ass from my fucking elbow them days. So, yeah, common purpose. He did his job though, he did his job well. David says that they have been cutting our avenues to defend ourselves, slowly, catchy monkey. It's not so much the cutting our avenues, that we've just accepted whatever shit. I mean, I remember back in the 80s when I were into shotguns and pistols and rifles. You could have any shotgun you wanted, and you could have them all over the house if you wanted. If you got firearms, you'd have them in a sealed safe, and each one had to be identified on your licence. But when it comes to shotguns, you could have as many as you fucking wanted. And that started to change, where they started to creep it in. I mean, I used to love, I had a Mossberg police, you know, American police shotgun. And so we used to load our own cartridges. So we used to melt our own slugs for this Mossberg, because it were a cylinder barrel, so it shot fucking everything. And we just had a ball. We'd go and buy big sacks full of fucking different shot. We'd buy all the big tubs of gunpowder as primers and everything, you know, wads and everything. We'd just reload our own fucking cartridges. We had tons of them. And we had some great fun. We weren't going out shooting people, you know what I'm saying? We had a lot of fucking fun. And it just started shutting it down and shutting it down and shutting it down. But they were all Masons, you know, they were all Masonic people that were into this shooting. And so the lodge said, this is what we're going to do. And then none of them, men that should have been saying, fuck off, who are you, what you playing at, telling me what to do. They were all lodged up. They were all in the lodges, so they were just going along with it, because they were pathetic pussies. And that's how it went. I mean, back in the day, any waterboard land, as it were then, we had the nod, you know, the secret, you can shoot on any waterboard land without any hassle. And then they all got privatised, and then it all changed, you know. But England were a good place to be. My generation, if we were, you know, if you looking and aware, you got to see actually what it is that's been destroyed in this 40 years, say 50 years, that I've been able to witness. And it's shocking, fucking shocking what's happened, and how our own have allowed this to happen, because they were all in the lodges, being told what to do by Khazarian grandmasters. Holy See affiliated grandmasters. What a mess. So there's been no Western males of quality for probably 200 years, I'd say. Probably Napoleonic Wars were at last. Because you can't say that they were quality males First World War because the fucking dumbasses celebrated when they declared war and all signed up. And got slaughtered and still kept signing up. That's thick, innit? I mean, that's not bright. That's not, I'm a warrior mentality. That's thick as fuck, innit? Let's be honest. You know what I'm saying? So I don't think we've been quality for a long, long time. I really don't. And it's sad. It really is sad to do because the people they're pulling in here and quality doesn't even arise as a word that can be used in the descriptive. I mean, subculture, subhuman, everything about them is deceptive. They're laughing at you. It's just all... Everything that goes against the original biblical Heavenly Father's laws. All goes against it completely. So it is sad. It really is sad. Eisenhower killed more Germans after the war. Well, Stalin did. But yeah, Eisenhower a bastard. Patton had it right. Patton realised, he said, fuck me, we're fighting the wrong race. Let me go into Russia and annihilate these sick, twisted bastards. Because these are your Eastern Asiatic people. The very people that Abe Finkelstein explained that they come from. Your Mongols. Yeah, Stalin finished off the Germans in a terrible way. And it was a sad, sad thing. Because when you start to recognise, actually, that everything you've been taught is propaganda, what a sad state of affairs the First and Second World War was. It was horrendous. Really was. Where are we there? You had a funny picture of Goldman Sachs. Did I? What, in there? Solvemist David says, it was shameful how the German people were treated post-war. It was. They were brainwashed for guilt. Do you know how much they paid? Something like 70 trillion Deutschmarks since the Second World War in reparations to these bastards that set it up. Fucking hell, you know? This is how thick we've all become in the West. We're still smarter than these subcultures, don't get me wrong. But compared to how we were when we were a proper civilization, we're not even a tenth of the man we were. 70 trillion in reparations they've paid since the Second World War to the very people that slaughtered them or got us to do it, and the Americans. I mean, how clever are they? That so sinister. When war declared by America on Germany, 52% of the American population had Germanic heritage, and yet still, this is what happens when they control your media. When they control the flow of information, like through Alex Jones, Tate Brothers, Tucker Carlson, who keep you fixed in this merry-go-round of data, adding little bits, coming at it from different angles, which makes you think you're getting something new when you're not. They're regurgitating, and what they're doing is gatekeeping to make sure you don't step outside that. So P. Diddy, all these that get set off, they jump on, keep it in the mix, and you think you're getting something. Like all these dickheads that talk law. I mean, let me tell you what I've done in these 7 months. I've used the knowledge I've gained to respond to what's happening, what's coming at me. Do you know what I'm saying? Not copying all this shit. What comes in as an inbound communication, I'm responding to that. And it's been interesting because it's a two-pronged game that I'm doing. It's because one of my friends didn't want to go to court, so I did it with paperwork. The other one went to court. Now, I have to say, on balance, you're fucking better off going to court. You're better off going to court armed with the right fucking stuff. You're going to get a German, right? Not going to court, the shit that they've piled down, because they just railroad you. Honestly, these two are so brave, because you lot out there, you'd have fucking fallen flat on your ass on the second communication. You just shit yourself on the second communication. So these two guys I'm helping are brave, I'll tell you now. But it's two sides. We're going, one that didn't want to do court and one that went to court, and they're completely fucking different. And I have to say, far easier going to court. So all these pricks that say never go to court, unless you've never responded ever to them, that may count. But if you're in the mix, not going to court is a big fucking mistake, unless you can wrap them up in paperwork. Now, we wrapped them up. I wrapped them up in a conditional acceptance, a counter offer, accepted. They've ignored that. But now, in the second one, the guy that went to court, that's now coming into play, you see, because now it's gone to an higher court. They haven't responded with a court date because 3 points have got them. Whereas the other side, it was just paperwork, railroading into official receivers. And so it's fucking hell, these guys, they just railroad you. But everything they're doing is on a fraud. Everything. It really is. And it's at the point now, it's coming full circle, so that the one that we didn't go to court with is coming to the point now where the rebuttal on the one that went to court is coming back into play, solid, for the other. So, fucking hell, what it's been worth doing. It really has. Because as I've said before, I don't get involved in anything anymore on my own personal level, so I can't experiment. Whereas this, coming down, has given me the opportunity to really get stuck in two different paths. One strategy not going to court, one strategy going to court. Excellent. Really learnt a lot. It was shame. Yeah, Twisted Shitbag. That's a good name for a punk band. Yeah, it is. Jimmy Savile's Vagina's a good one. A better one. Don't think he likes that. Clay pigeons. I never shot animals. Yeah, clay pigeons we did. We never shot animals neither. We'd shoot anything apart from animals. We'd get them in the sights, hares and all that, but we never shot them. We were into shooting things. We were just into shooting. But we used to have our own clay pigeon pull, and we'd be off at 5 o'clock in the morning with fucking bags of clay pigeons, bandoliers of fucking cartridges, carrier bags full of cartridges because we reloaded our own. We'd have small shot, we'd have SGs, which were 9 shot, and we had slugs. Them slugs, we used to like them. We used to have some fun with them slugs, I'll tell you. But pretty much moors, all the northern moors up here, we've shot pretty much everything that you can shoot. Any monuments, anything, we've shot it at some point when we were kids, And we used to play army and all sorts with them. We were a bit crazy. We were crazy, but we never managed to hurt each other. But I'll tell you what else you have a lot of fun with, is paintballs. If you ever go paintballing with a bunch of mates, it's as adrenaline pumping as combat, because you don't fucking want to get shot with them things, especially these up-to-date ones. And if you really want to play and put first strike in them, you don't want to get shot. And we used to play, we got them first, the 80s when they first come out, and we fucking had some fun with them. So paintballing's a great. No, I'm not interested in going on them camps where they all have it set up. Fuck that. You want to get your bunch of mates in a forest and then go on to two sides. Then play manhunt where one ear is being chased by the... Now that's fucking scary stuff, I'll tell you, where you've got like 10 guys chasing you with these fucking paintball guns. And But if you want to learn combat and if you want to learn how to escape and evade, that is the perfect opportunity. Because you don't want to get shot. The Lone Rizzler grew up with guns, pistols, shotguns, rifles. There was a time the old Bill needed a reason to turn you down for a shotgun licence. Exactly. Well, you don't actually need a shotgun licence if you're not person. Do you? June says, our right is to bear arms. English Bill of Rights. Being buried by the British Union, we all should know our rights. Well, the right to bear arms is actually taken from the right to bear a coat of arms, which then gives you the right to protect that coat of arms with weaponry. Because it goes back to Civil War when you had to have a musket. Everybody had to have a musket on call. It's a long time since I went into that, but it's not as clear-cut as people think in relation to how that works, yeah, but it's more fun than you'd think, says David, absolutely. Now, I've got something else I want to do, because this is important data for the autumn equinox. So I'll just bang this through, and then we'll have another look at you, and then we'll wrap it up.
It starts with Israel attacking Iran. The plan is for either Iran or for China to retaliate after Iran is struck with a nuclear weapon. At that point, there will be a limited nuclear exchange in the Middle East, followed by a ceasefire. He heard this being planned in this meeting. This is being choreographed. The idea is that as the world looks upon this with horror, then they will demand from their governments that there are heavy controls over travel, over communication, over people who meet, over people who protest in the streets. And because people will be driven into fear by this, they'll request and demand and insist on heavy controls from their governments, which will be justified. And this is where you're going to kind of get the martial law situation in all the Western countries.
Think quite carefully about the description. Think quite carefully about the description. Think quite carefully about the description.
Say no.
White male goes to war. The women will be left to the subcultures.
To think quite carefully about the description.
They
simply say no. And that's what we all should do. Because this will end if we simply say no. Simply say no. And that's what we all should do. Because this will end if we simply say no. And that's what we're here to do today. They say no. And that's what we should do. Because this will end if we simply say no. No.
If the white male goes to war, women will be left to the subcultures.
And this is where you're going to kind of get a martial law situation in all the Western countries. And then, he said, then the real war starts.
So, that's what I see as a game playing out, if they can get that together. So, keep that in mind, folks, and keep your eyes on what's going on out there in the big wide world, and don't let them put you off and divert you with the nonsense. Grangel tune. Well, on that diatribe, I'll say thanks for joining. Thanks, mods, if you're still there for modding. Hope you have a good week, and till the next time.
electronic engineering,